Just wanted to welcome to our panel discussion about women in activism in the 21st century. This event is part of our One Book, One Beaverton program, which is Beaverton City Library's annual community-wide read. Hopefully you've heard about it. We were inspired to put this panel together by the character of Elizabeth Gurley Flynn from this year's book, The Cold Millions. So for those of you who read it, those of you who didn't, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, who was a real person, born in 1890, was a fiery labor activist and feminist who co-founded the American Civil Liberties Union. She was an activist to her very core and spent her entire life from the time she was a young 15 years old until her death at 74, advocating for the causes that she believed in. So we were curious what it's like to be an activist today in our own era in the 21st century. So we invited 3 women to discuss their work and their experiences. Please help me welcome Rochelle Chase from Mom Block, Sol Mora with the Coalition of Communities of Color, and Chelsea Watson with the Oregon AFL-CIO. I would also like to introduce our discussion moderator tonight is Megan Cohen, who works for our fantastic city of Beaverton as a program administrator in our community services and cultural inclusion programs. And now I'm going to pass it over to Megan to get us started.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Anne. I'm really excited that we get to have these 3 women here tonight and to talk a little bit about what activism and organizing looks like. So we are, just so you all know kind of what to expect for tonight. I'm sure many of you are used to our Zoom environment, but just keep yourselves on mute. You're welcome to have video up, but if there's any kind of issues with internet slowing down or not being able to hear anything, that's always a good way to speed it up. I think any questions that you have as we go along, you can go ahead and put them in chat, and we're going to try to get to questions in the last 15 minutes. The first kind of part of this, we're going to just hear a little bit from our 3 panelists, ask them a couple questions, and then we will, in the last part of the evening, open it up to you all. But you can stick those questions in the chat anytime as they come up. And that's, yeah, I think that's everything. So we're going to go ahead and get started by just learning a little bit about each of the folks that we have here. So the first question is, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what motivated you to do the work that you do. And I'm going to start with Rochelle, then Sol, then Chelsea.
Thanks, Megan. Let's see. I think being involved in activism is really something that I was raised to do. My mom was an activist when I was a child, and when I think back, I remember going to a lot of protests. I remember a lot of letter writing campaigns. The way that I learned to write apparently was writing letters to the South African government and corporations like Coca-Cola, trying to get them to divest from the South African government. So, and before that, my grandmother was an activist. My mom grew up in Boston when the civil rights movement was happening. I should back up a little bit. I identify as Black. I'm also biracial. So my mom is my Black parent. She grew up in Boston. And her mother was really active in the movement to desegregate Boston's public schools. So, being an activist, being vocal, standing up for things that I believe in is just kind of how I was raised. And, as I became a mother myself, those issues that have always been pressing and urgent really became even more so because I had some extra skin in the game. That was my children. And my son has cerebral palsy. So, what I felt like I needed to act on has just, expanded as I've become more aware of the ways that people with disabilities are marginalized and, children in schools on IEPs and things like that. So that's kind of my story.
Awesome. Thanks, Rochelle. I will turn it over to Sol.
Hi, everyone. I hope that you are all having a great night. Rochelle, thank you so much for sharing. Definitely, such an inspiring, legacy and that generational knowledge just being passed down. So I just wanted to share that. I loved hearing that. Hi, everyone. My name is Sol Mora. I use she, her pronouns. I'm with the Coalition of Communities of Color. I was born in Tijuana, Mexico, and my family immigrated to the United States when I was 6. And I think that for me, really one of the most informative reasons that I decided to do community organizing was just seeing the lived experiences that my family faced having immigrated to this country. Even when I was younger, before I had the language to really name, this is what my family is going through, these are the systems that we are experiencing. It was just something that I always noticed. And as the eldest daughter in my family, I also had to be that advocate, whether it was translating documents, really making sure that my family had our basic needs met. It always put me into a kind of position where I noticed, these things aren't equitable. We aren't receiving, our basic needs are just not being met in the same ways that others are. And so I think all of that just kind of internalized inside me. And as I got older and was finally able to point to things and say, oh my gosh, like this is this structural system and it works in this way, it impacts people in this way, it just really became knowledge that I wanted to give back to my community. My mom right now doesn't speak a lot of English. And so for me, it became really important to find ways to make that type of language accessible and make that, activism accessible to communities across different languages. And so I think for me, again, just having that lived experience as a child is really what motivated me.
Thanks, Sol. Yeah, definitely hearing some themes there about family background and having the understanding before you even have the vocabulary to go along with it. So, and building that as you go. So I will turn it over to Chelsea to add on. Chelsea, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm using my phone, so there's 2 mutes. So I took my phone off mute, but the computer mute was on. Sorry about that. What I said was thank you, Megan, and thank you, Sol, and thank you, Rochelle. And that was really exciting and inspiring. And I knew signing up for this that I would love to learn more about both of you, but that was a great introduction. My story is a little different. It's sort of pretty boring. I'm from Steubenville, Ohio. It's a really small town in the Rust Belt, foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. Working class family. My dad was a truck driver. My mom was a full-time parent. So like I never heard anyone mention social justice or, and I saw a lot of poverty. It's a kind of a declining area, but didn't experience it myself. I've been privileged, middle class or lower middle class, but I've never really struggled. I just have a sort of innate empathy for people and really care about people, combined with like a kind of at times obnoxious, like detail-oriented curiosity. So just kind of grew to question like why there's such inequity in our society, why things are the way they are, the systemic issues that you both mentioned. And I think I just slowly wanted to better understand the seen and unseen forces impacting the world around me. And that's how I sort of stumbled into a career of activism.
Awesome. Thank you, Chelsea. All right, we're going to go to our second question, which is, how did you get involved for the first time with organizing or activism? So was there, an activity or an organization that you kind of started with? I know a few of you shared, you all shared kind of those starting moments for you and what inspired you. But if there's just one kind of activity or organization that really felt like it was the starting place for you and getting involved. So I am going to start with Sol this time.
Yeah, I think for me, it was definitely when I was in high school that I first really started to see what I was doing as activism. I think at the beginning, there was that disconnect between what I was already engaging in and had been engaging in, but really, again, naming it as activism. So when I was in high school, I was really involved with two programs, the Teen Action Team and Community 101. And so being involved in those two programs, which were really focused on giving youth the ability to serve their community through various activities, clothing drives, food drives, going out and really meeting with the community and providing those basic needs. I think once I started to do more of that, and again, just really see the way that people experience living in a city depends on where they live, the way that people are moving through the world really depends on their identities, and also starting to find the intersections, right? Like the intersections between your race, between income. It really all went back to being in high school and finally feeling like I could create some type of change. I think when you're younger, you do feel like you don't have those avenues or those pathways to actually enact some type of change. And so for me, it was really important to see what I did as activism and to also encourage my peers to continue to do that type of work. And after that, I really had other opportunities and did internships, but I think it definitely started with the programs that I had at my high school.
Thanks, Sol. Yeah, definitely that youth voice is really important. I think that's a time when a lot of folks get to kind of start exploring a little bit as well. So I'm gonna go to Chelsea and then Rochelle.
Thank you, Megan. I think I got the mute this time. So, okay, so I actually have a very specific story. I mentioned kind of growing up and sort of absorbing and having a very sort of unchanneled bleeding heart and no real direction for it, but just caring about things a lot. I was looking at a job. This is going to tell my age, but I was looking for a job, my first kind of grown up job. It was in the Columbus Dispatch newspaper on Sunday. They had a bunch of advertisements, and there were the categories, service industry, administrative, engineering, and there was one. It said activism, and there was one job, and it was an organization called Working America that is a community partner of the national AFL-CIO, American Federation of Labor, Congress of Industrial Organization, the Federation of Labor Unions that I work for now. And I think at first I was like, it's better than a job that doesn't mean anything. I want, something rewarding. But I had always sort of had a kind of global citizen attitude, and I was really interested in I think if I had thought it through, I would be thinking about working with refugees or asylum seekers or something, maybe social work. I didn't see the labor movement as my path, but I had, getting that position and staying there for many years now, I see the connections between economic justice and social justice. And what really motivates me to stay in the labor movement is, just having a union contract, a voice on the job, really just statistically, factually narrows the gender pay gap and the gap for workers of color. And we'll talk more, I think, about my movement and how race impacts it. And I know that's the next question, but I think that that I unexpectedly found the intersection of all my sort of passions in the labor movement, and that all came from that news article that ad I answered in the newspaper. And I'd had that job for 5 years, and then took a little break, but then I came back to the labor movement. I just I really feel that connection to those bigger picture social justice passions I had.
I love that. That's the power of good marketing there for future jobs. So being able to really pinpoint something that speaks to somebody and providing that entry point. All right, Rochelle, you're up.
I think the moment my activism changed from being a single voice making a lot of noise just as an individual to something more more like organizing and kind of more, I guess, official was probably summer of 2020. Mom Block was formed kind of out of the crumbling of the wall of moms. And it was a moment where, you know, as Wall of Moms came together and was a lot of well-intended white women working to advocate on behalf of Black lives, conversations were happening about, you know, who should be leading this, whose voices should be listened to, whose perspectives we should be centering. And, you know, so there was a group of Black women who, you know, we kind of came together and started having side conversations as we were noticing just that things in Wall of Moms weren't feeling quite right, and that we were feeling disempowered in a movement ostensibly, you know, organized to support us as Black people. So when we came together as you know, Black women and femmes, and looked at what worked well from Wall of Moms and what we didn't want to see lost, we were kind of able to like shape our own vision and our own way forward. And you know, there were a whole bunch of us, and we came from different places and different perspectives. But you know, we had this commonality as Black moms, and Black moms who were just tired of the violence and the injustice. We recognized that the movement for Black lives is, you know, the protests are certainly an important part of that, but are not the only part of that. And that, you know, in the majority of the time when people are not in the streets, people don't have their signs, people aren't out there chanting, you know, there are families who need food, there are children who need access to education. This was in the middle of the pandemic, when, you know, we were all super concerned about equitable education for our kiddos, even as our community was at higher risk for COVID. So, you know, really like coming together to use mutual aid as a vehicle to make sure that the needs in our community that were many then and continue to be were being met. And kind of around the same time, Equitable Giving Circle was formed, and that's another mutual aid group that I'm involved in. And it was kind of the same idea. It was just, you know, recognizing need and acting to meet that immediate need, like in real time. And that's not something you can do successfully by yourself, because it requires resources and it requires time and energy and all of these things. So yeah, I think that summer, there was just so much need and so much suffering, but also people were really activated, and we kind of reached that critical mass of awareness. That was really, you know, kind of a transformative moment in my own activism.
Thanks, Rochelle. Yeah, I hear from several of you just once you've kind of gotten into the work and started being in community with folks, how you kind of learn about the other needs of the folks that you're working with, and kind of hear from different groups, learning about the other kind of social safety net pieces that are needed as you continue to do the work. So Rochelle, I'm wondering, you mentioned mutual aid, if you can just share a little bit about what mutual aid is and how maybe that looks different from other organizations.
Yeah, so mutual aid is really responding to real need in real time. It's no strings attached. It's grassroots kind of giving and organizing. It's community care and collective care. So, you know, in the Black community, it's really, you know, recognizing that historically, contemporaneously, we cannot trust that the needs that we have as a community will be met by by the government, by social services agencies, by anyone. That's not us. So it's really the idea that we take care of us. So, a couple ways that Mom Block does that. We have women and families messaging us all the time, needing to leave a domestic violence situation, for example, and we'll just, fundraise micro grants and, get, whether it's $500 or $1,000, like get some money together real fast that we can send to a mom who needs help. With no application processes, we don't want to hear your story. I don't mean that in a rude way, but the way that giving is set up in our society is really, you have to fill out an application. You have to qualify. You have to be within, this income bracket. And we don't operate like that. Like, you don't have to justify your need. You don't have to tell us a bunch of personal information about what you're going through. If you need help, you need help, and we're here for that. So I think that is the best way I can describe mutual aid.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. Mutual aid was a pretty new topic to me during the pandemic, and just for all of you in Beaverton, there's the Beaverton food project that has free food fridges in our neighborhoods. So that was kind of my first experience with mutual aid projects, and just the way you explain the barriers and minimizing those kind of entries to resources, I think just is really powerful, and different type of organizing. So thank you for sharing a little bit more about that. All right, so next, I think you all have kind of hit on your backgrounds and your identities, but with the Cold Millions, as Jenny said, our kind of protagonists in that book interact with Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, who's this woman activist, and like her experiences are very different and very illuminate the ways in which her background informs the work she does. So I was hoping you could touch a little bit on how the way you identify, if it's race, gender, other identity aspects, influence or impact the work that you do. And I'm also hoping you can just share a little bit more about your organization if you haven't already. So I'm going to start with Chelsea. If you can share a little bit about AFL-CIO and how the work you do intersects with your identity, that would be great.
Okay, so I would be happy to. Thank you, Megan. The AFL-CIO is a federation of labor unions. There's 45 or so in the state of Oregon affiliated with the federation. That covers sectors, public, private sectors. So people who work for the federal, state, county governments, postal workers and letter carriers, then a lot of grocery store workers in the private sector, and a big portion of our membership are the building and construction trades councils, and then some smaller unions, the musicians, locals, and the stagehands, some really cool entertainment locals. So it's a very diverse economic set of membership, and we represent over 300,000 people in this state. So, and that we kind of work for advanced things that would benefit all of those unions and support the right to collectively bargain, but also just fight to raise the bar for workers in general. We've been really engaged with things like raising minimum wage and other protections that don't necessarily really impact union members. Most of our federation has paid sick days and makes above minimum wage, but just to fight for workers' rights in general and raise the bar for everyone. So that's the organization. And I'd say, that, like I mentioned, equity is a major motivator for me to do my job, but I'm aware that the labor movement has a long history that parallels America's history, and it's flawed, and it has not always been as inclusive as I wish it had been. And I think that a lot of us are definitely working to change that, and that it can be seen in, like I said, a lot of statistics that show that just if you have a contract on the job, you can't just decide you're going to pay someone else more because you like them better and they speak your lingo. So it just narrows these sort of pay gaps that exist in our country. But I will say within union leadership, because I work for a federation, I mostly interact with union leaders, that more than 50% of our federation is women, and that is not representative of our leadership board. And I often find myself the only woman in a room. And I think that as intimidating as that might be for me, then I try to think of what other voices are not present and how much, how much more of a barrier someone from a historically and currently marginalized community would face, especially if they were a woman in that context. So I really try to always think about the perspectives that aren't in the room and how to get them in the room, and just make sure that they're not forgotten, because like I said, sometimes I feel like I might be mostly in a room full of men and that might not be thinking that way. So I try to be really conscious of that, and understanding I can't know where the experience of anyone else, but just trying to bring those perspectives in to the organization. So I think that my race has made it a little easier, definitely easier for trying to diversify leadership within the labor movement, and that I am really proud of the work we do overall economically for equity.
Thanks, Chelsea. I was thinking about just during that, how much of a motivator that can be to get involved as well. So I've been participating in unions and wanted to get more involved when I saw that it was a room full of men, and just thought about, I think there's something else that I can bring with my own experience. So just appreciate you kind of thinking about how that looks like moving forward, and how we continue to do that work once we're in the room as well. So I'm going to go to Rochelle and then Seoul.
So the two groups that I organize with are founded and led by Black women. So obviously that part of my identity is very central to my organizing experience. And Mom Block specifically, has mom in the name. And that's really, that kind of says it all about how my identity influences the work that I do. As a Black woman, obviously I am a light-skinned Black woman. I have a certain amount of privilege as I move through the world, and being able to, being multiracial, I am able to kind of bridge groups and bridge spaces, and I think that I have an obligation to do that. So, organizing on behalf and in community with other Black women is super important to me for that reason. We all bring different skills and gifts and abilities to the work that we do, and kind of being able to bridge audiences is something that I'm able to contribute. Also, being a parent, particularly these days with the pandemic happening and just so much uncertainty and weirdness. If you have kids, you're pretty concerned about how they're going to come through this moment in time. What is going to happen? Are they going to get an education? How is it going to happen? Are they going to get sick at school? Like all of these things. And that's a pretty universal experience for parents right now, and is just really like, obviously it's motivating, but everything just feels like so much more dire now than it has in years past. So, in both of these groups I organize with, I think Black moms, or the Black moms that I work with, again, it's just like really that that recognition and understanding that, no one's gonna come and make sure our families are okay. No one's gonna come and make sure that my kiddo on an IEP is getting what he needs, or that our neighbors are have access to fresh food and things like that. Like, we're doing that for each other, and so it's really just I think when you have a particular identity, it just puts you in a better proximity to see like what those needs are, and understand how to meet those needs. So I think that is part of why identity is so closely linked to the activism work that I do. Throughout the pandemic, I have heard a lot of people from outside of the Black community speaking on behalf of Black people and saying what we need, what our kids need, what should happen in terms of school, or what should happen in terms of vaccine, or whatever the case may be. And I'm sure people are coming from a space of wanting to be helpful, but you have to allow, not even allow, that's paternalistic too, but you have to make sure that there is access and space for communities to speak for themselves. And so that's really what Mom Block is about identifying our own needs, and kind of bringing the meeting of those needs to fruition, and not having other groups or other activists with different agendas speak on our behalf. It's really activating to like take care of ourselves.
Thanks, Rochelle. I think naming that right in the actual group itself, both in the description and in the title of the group, and then in kind of the values and mission that you've set out, is a really powerful way to pull together those identity pieces and the service and outcomes that you're hoping for in the work. So I'm going to turn it over to Seoul.
Hi again, everyone. So the Coalition of Communities of Color, just to give you a little bit of background of who we are as an organization, we are an alliance of culturally specific organizations and service providers, mainly based in the Portland metro area. The CCC was formed in 2001, and I think it came about during a time when there were so many city processes and policies that were being put in place that were really pitting communities of color against each other. And so rather than bridging those cross-cultural differences, you had these, marginalized communities who were trying to fight for their rights and to have their basic needs met. And so the coalition was really formed out of the desire to, recognize those differences, and to also understand that cross-cultural collective action is really one of the key ways that we will ensure that, the city and these institutions around us are recognizing what our shared struggles are and where the differences are between those, and that we are working together in that process, right? I think it's really important when we talk about different movements and the intersections between them to understand that we are stronger together, and to understand that, our differences are really what bring us together, and understanding what they are is a form of celebration. Like, we really shouldn't be afraid to, understand and recognize what those differences are. So my role specifically with the CCC right now is really focused on our community engagement efforts. Again, we are more based in the Portland metro area. And right now, the city of Portland is undergoing a charter review process. So this process is a process that happens every 10 years in which the city government and, our voting system, these really crucial pieces to the way that our city functions, are going to be reviewed and changes will be recommended. So I think for me, my identity, the way that it plays into this is understanding that the way that people experience, reaching out to the city or not reaching out is really affected by their identity. If you are an immigrant or a refugee, it is a lot more difficult for you to have access to that information, or to even understand how the city is set up, who our elected leaders are. And so for me, as I'm thinking about designing workshop curriculums, event opportunities, I am trying to make that information as accessible as possible, and really equip people with the tools that they need to get involved, with the civic engagement of the city. I think that that term is still something that is not resonating with a lot of our communities because we're excluded from that city hall decision making. You know, when you haven't been a part of that conversation for decades, that term isn't going to mean anything to you. And so I'm really trying to create different avenues so that people, you know, understand that their lived experience is valuable, and that is directly the knowledge that they can use to inform city processes. I just always really love to position, you know, that lived experience as this is what our elected leaders and our cities need to listen to decide what the community needs and what needs to happen. And also involving them, you know, in a way that is actually valuing their emotional labor and compensating them for that labor. So I think my identity just gives me this awareness of thinking about, oh my gosh, cute baby, how to approach that in the most equitable way.
Thanks, Sol. Yeah, and I'll just add another Beaverton nugget that Coalition of Communities of Color was really involved in creating a report for Washington County called Leading with Race, Research Justice in Washington County. It's an incredible report that really centers the lived realities of communities of color here in Washington County, including Beaverton, and along multiple kind of different areas, so housing, healthcare. It's really great to dive into. So I'll drop that in the chat. But a great way to kind of learn a little bit more about what that looks like. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Sil. All right. Next question, and then we will see where we're at for time, is one piece of practical advice that you would give to somebody looking to get involved in organizing or activism. And I'm going to start with Rochelle this time, then Sol, then Chelsea.
You know, I think my advice is figure out what you're good at, and then find a way to, you know, lend those efforts into the causes that you feel passionately about. Short answer.
This is a perfect answer. All right, so.
I love that. I definitely agree. I think, you know, looking at community organizing and activism and thinking about the fact that you have a role in community, I think that's just such a great framework to use when you are trying to get involved. We all have a role in our community. And when you are able to, you know, understand the value of that and try and see what things you're already passionate about, whether it be writing, photography, and combine those, I think it just creates an easier avenue to do that. One thing I would add in addition to that, that was really helpful for me, was doing internships and volunteering. I started volunteering with an organization called Causa when I was in high school. They are an immigrant rights organization here in Oregon. And, you know, just doing a few events throughout the entire year, you don't even have to be super involved at the beginning. I think just going to those events and doing those opportunities really surrounded me with people that had so much more experience than I did, and, you know, had these different roles in their community. And it was creating that network that really has led to even the current position that I have right now. I think when you're doing this type of community organizing work, it can be very short term at the beginning, like you're going from one position to the next, you know, trying out different things, or, you know, if the nature of the work is more short, if it's a campaign that you're working on, again, you really do rely on those different connections and that network to offer the next opportunity. So I would really say start volunteering, you know, get to know the people who are at that organization. And I think you'll realize that there are so many other organizations that are just working closely with one another, and that will just give you more opportunities along the way.
That's great. Yeah, exploring. There's lots of opportunity to explore. We're so lucky to live in an area with so many organizations and amazing groups looking to support our community and do social service or social activism work. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity to see what might be the right fit, or where you really feel like you're finding your passion. So I love that idea. So thanks. All right, Chelsea.
All right, that was excellent advice. So I think I'm going to build off of that and add the layer that, you know, to be an activist, to be even an organizer, it doesn't necessarily mean you do it for a career or even that it has to be an extracurricular activity. I would say my advice is, you know, to speak up when you hear things that aren't right. And that's something that sounds cheesy, but it's something I really had to learn because I'm as passionate as I am, as much as I love people, and it makes me, I had trouble with confrontation, you know? So I think for a long time I let things slide, or I expected that like the immigrant in the room would address that issue because they're the immigrant in the room, but I can't speak to that. But then I've learned that that's a burden that shouldn't always be placed on someone from a marginalized community, you know, to be aware of when to step back and when to step up, and just to, in family context, in work context, if you're not working in a organizing field, you know, not to cause fights, but to just, like, I think that's one of the most impactful ways to enact change is to someone that trusts you, for you to politely say, actually, I disagree and here's why. And, you know, to just correct these micro things that are around us all the time. So I think there's that level as well that can be done in any workplace or home.
Awesome. Yeah. Find your passion, explore some opportunities, and then speak up and interrupt things that you're seeing or hearing that aren't right. That's great advice. Well, before we turn it over to audience questions, I have one other piece just of activism and organizing. I think this is community care work, but also self-care is a really important part of kind of maintaining the work we do. I just want to know if there's a piece of self-care that is kind of your go-to to help balance the work. And we'll do kind of a quick round with Seoul, Chelsea, and then Rochelle.
This is something that I have been struggling with so much lately. And I think working from home has definitely been adding another component to it. So my piece of advice is, you know, eat 3 meals a day, eat as much as makes you feel, you know, healthy and makes you feel ready for the next day. Because as simple advice as that is, when you get so caught up in the work, I think that it just becomes really easy to ignore what your physical needs are in that moment. And it's something that I've really had to like step back as, you know, in this new year. And it's something I'm making a priority, is to really like take each day depending on how I'm feeling physically and really honor, you know, how I feel for that day, whether it's with my mental health or physical health, to really understand that, you know, urgency, honestly, I think is a tool of white supremacy. And when you burn out, you aren't able to continue this work. So again, just honor what your needs are for that day and understand that the work will still be there the next day. And when you feel better, you can get to it.
Yes, that's great. Eating is important, and eating good things. We've got lots of good food around here. So, all right, Chelsea.
Yeah, I'll say similarly that the work-life boundary really blurred with working from home, which I know, once again, is a very lucky position to be in. And a lot of our members weren't, you know, they have essential jobs that they can't do that. So I appreciate the safety of working from home during this pandemic, but it does sometimes feel like I could work forever. That won't get done. So I think, and adding on to the meals a day, I have practiced, I have gone in and out of doing, but that I really think is helpful for self-care is starting and ending the day with a commute, even though I'm at my house, with like a walk, you know, maybe a 20-minute walk, and then actually unplug, so after that walk.
Yes. Nothing I think more kind of fulfilling sometimes than that fresh air to just kind of reset your brain really fast, especially when it's like in the 30s. So it gets harder, but it's good practice. All right, Rochelle.
I'm, you know, on the same train as Sol and Chelsea, working from home, having kids around while I'm trying to do that more than should should be happening. This year is definitely better than last year, but there's quarantines and things happening, so my kids are always here at unexpected times. So it's really been like recognizing my basic foundational needs and meeting them, eating when I'm hungry, or actually not even that, because you get so just like wrapped up, I forget that I'm hungry or I don't notice, but eating, drinking all of my water. Like Chelsea mentioned, I've made a point of getting up and getting out and going for a 15 or 20 or 30-minute walk every day if I can. Really just those human things, that keep like your body and your mind working together on your side. I think the other thing, and probably the biggest, is learning how to say no and having boundaries, having a cutoff time for how late I'm going to work into the night, saying no to something that I just don't have the capacity for. It's really hard to do. I think as women, we are, I don't know, set up to say yes to all of the things in a lot of ways, and, be pleasers and non-disappointers, and, like, sure, I can do that, no problem. I can't do everything. Neither can you. You don't have to. Neither do I. So kind of giving myself that permission is huge.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. We can all hold each other accountable to good self-care. I think that's a piece that I have to pull other people in sometimes, but those grounding aspects of listening to what our body needs and providing for it just are what help us stay connected, I think, to the work as we keep moving forward too. So I really appreciate you all sharing that. So
hey,
yeah,
can I add one thing too?
Sure.
It's like kind of messed up that eating and moving your body is something that we consider as self-care, because that's really like existing in a healthy way, right? So my hope for us all is that we can get beyond like treating ourselves with basic respect, so that self-care actually becomes like something extra that's really filling our buckets, rather than just like keeping us kind of on an even keel.
Yep. I love that you added that, and just there's the basic nourishment, and then there's the spiritual or emotional nourishment that has to happen too. So finding the ways to fill all of those and get beyond kind of that basic level. Yeah. All right. Well, we are open for questions. So drop any questions you have in the chat. I see one in there. First one, which is what gives you hope? So maybe something either you're seeing kind of as you're organizing or just in your day-to-day life. But what gives you hope? And whoever wants to kind of jump in and start here, go for it.
Well, I'll start. The kids. The kids are awesome. The kids are doing amazing things. The kids are brave. The kids are smart. The kids are all right. The kids definitely give me hope. The little ones, the high schoolers, they've just their generation has been like turned upside down by this pandemic. They're getting the short end of the stick in a lot of ways, but they're so smart and thoughtful and kind and resilient that I think they will take this mess that we're in and make something transformative out of it.
That's great.
I can jump in here next to kind of go off the other end of the spectrum. I think for me, one thing that has really been giving me hope lately is having those difficult conversations across, older generations, and really like talking to my parents about, again, concepts that they haven't really had the language to understand, and still seeing that they're very open and receptive to wanting to learn about those things. One thing that has been very prominent in my life and with my family is really talking about mental health and the stigma that surrounds it. My father really struggles with it. And so it honestly does give me hope when he's willing to have these very difficult conversations and to take a new approach at these things that just weren't a part of our culture or his culture growing up. And so I feel like there's so much to learn from unlearning, and there's so much that gives me hope in knowing that humans are capable of self-reflection and really like growing in that way. It's never too late to understand that maybe you are engaging in harmful behavior and unlearning and unpacking that. So I would say that's one thing that gives me hope.
Yeah, and I'll just throw in there that that's beautiful, and that meeting people like everyone on the screen, like the people I interact with daily, it just feels like that I'm not alone, and that we're not going to give up. And I've seen great things happen with collective action and people working together, and I know it can happen again. And just like consistently meet people that really, blow my mind and impress me, and I feel like there is hope.
Yeah, I was going to say, you all definitely give me hope. Seeing folks get, I think, involved in organizing and growing kind of the different movements has been really powerful. I think it's, Rochelle, you kind of mentioned how tough the pandemic has been and what a tough time, but also it just seems like a time where people have been really spurred to get involved as well. So I'm just thankful for you three being here and for the work that you're doing. Also, if you want to share anything else about your organizations and drop it in the chat, please feel free. And it looks like we have another question in the chat. So this might be a good question to end on too. But Anne's got a question. What is your vision for a peaceful and just world? And again, I'll give you a little time to think about it, and then whoever wants to jump in.
I have something that came to mind right away, and it's that I want a world where all Oregonians, all people have an equal opportunity for a healthy life, and all the things that come with a healthy life. And I think that's my vision.
Mine is a society where everyone has what they need, where there is not need, where everyone has access to shelter and healthcare and education and food and medication and therapy. all of those things, I really believe that if all of our basic needs were met, the houselessness, the violence, the addiction, all of the things that are hurting us in our lives and how we live, and in our families and in our communities. Those are all things with solutions, and those solutions begin with simply meeting people's basic needs, and we have the resources to do that. So that's my vision.
Yeah, I think for me, definitely echo what you both said. And I feel like, a world that I imagine is one where we don't need to be resilient. I think that's a word that gets thrown out so much, in our communities. You're so resilient, like you went through this experience and you came out of it and you're stronger. But I don't want to be resilient all the time. I want to be gentle and be creative and like have opportunities to engage in other things. And so I would say a world in which, yes, like our basic needs are met and the conditions are, really set forth so people have more time to explore other things. I always get really sad when I don't have time to write or to read or to engage in those types of activities, because it's just not something that is realistic in that moment. And I also think about, how many people because they're just surviving, because they're just trying to make ends meet. Again, you can't explore your full self or explore what your life would look like if those barriers weren't there. And so I really wish we could all just like be creative and explore those things without survivability having to be the number one thing that we think of when we wake up.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you all. I wish I were a better artist in this moment so I could like draw us all a picture of kind of what you coalesced together using the like whiteboard jam here on Zoom, but you don't want that tonight. But I think we can all kind of benefit from spending time visioning that piece around what a peaceful and just world looks like, and imagining that for ourselves and in community with each other, and how different kind of we would approach kind of each other if we could put that what we imagine into practice. So I think this is a great step, just having you all here to share your experiences and your work. Again, thank you so much for the work that you do, and for taking the time to be here tonight. Sharing those experiences is its own labor, so I just really want to recognize that, and glad to be here with you all tonight. Thanks to everyone in the audience who joined, and to the library again for hosting One Book, One Beaverton events. And we are gonna call it a night. You can all go hopefully eat delicious food and do some self-care. So with that, I will close.
Thank you, everyone.
Great program, Jenny and Anne and Megan. Thank you so much. That was very inspiring.
Thanks, Glenn. Glad you could make it.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn.
Congratulations on another successful program. Very inspiring.
I feel very inspired. I feel very inspired by those women. All five of them, all four of them. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations and have
Thanks.
a good evening.
All right.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye. All right, I'm going to end the meeting. So everyone have a great night. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Jenny.
Thanks, Anne. Oh, Anne, can you stop the recording?
Oh, yeah. Let's see.